All right, football fans, welcome to another Wednesday edition of the Call Sheet Daily. I'm your host, Kevin Smith. This is Whiteboard Wednesday, where we talk to real football coaches about the X's and O's of football. Today, we're actually going to take a little bit of a different angle. Oftentimes on Whiteboard Wednesday, we're breaking down a play concept, a scheme. But today, we're taking a broader view, and we're going to get into a discussion on how you put together a call sheet. All right, this program is called the Call Sheet, and we're going to get into the literal call sheet, how you put that together and assemble that for game day. And joining me on the program, returning to the show, is Coach Steve Scanlon. Welcome back, Steve.
Thank you, Coach. Really grateful to be on, and hopefully get some more opportunities to continue to be a part of this.
Yeah, man. We're in the process of actually expanding some of what we're doing with the coaching podcasts, and Steve's going to join us in that endeavor. Looking forward to that and get an opportunity to talk to a broader audience about a wider variety of subjects. It's going to be really cool. Things are progressing nicely here at Fans First. So, Steve, our topic today, call sheets, how you build one, what goes into that process. I'm sure the audience is pretty familiar with the notion of a call sheet, but let's be specific. What are we talking about exactly?
Yeah, so I think when you mention that, I always picture like the giant Andy Reid, play menu selection, or Sean McVay kind of reading through 100 miles an hour at what he's looking at, but just kind of the plan of attack for an offense of what do we want to do per situations, how are we making sure we're getting our playmakers the ball in positions that are advantageous for the offense, and finding a way to win, and that's kind of the whole point of setting that game plan up and that specific call sheet.
It's funny because you're right. I always joke. I always called Andy Reid's the Denny's menu, but then you look at like some of the air raid guys. I mean, Mike Leach famously had his whole call sheet on an index card.
Yeah, so, I think there's some genius to that too, and it's funny you bring that up. There's definitely something I want to mention with that in mind, but I think their level of coaching and sophistication was built throughout. And then on the flip side, like, you see all the work that Gruden is doing today, and everybody knows the famous, Spider 2 wide banana and what he would do to those draft eligible quarterbacks, putting them on the board, and just how extensive their offense is as well. So there's definitely the beauty of football. There's many ways to do something and be successful.
Absolutely, man. So let's talk about this process. Okay. You whether you wind up with the index card or the Denny's menu, your whole plan is going on that call sheet. So where do you start? It's Monday morning, and you're not playing a game for 6 days or 5 days, whatever it might be, and you're starting from scratch, man. Take us through this process.
So I actually think, surprise, surprise, like all things football, the heaviest lifting of a call sheet, I think, is done during this time of year. Your January to June type of year. And what I mean by that is that you have to know within your system the certain problems that you're going to face from, good players or from good coaches, and kind of prepare what your counter punches are going to be and how you're going to have answers for that. And I think the teams that are most successful, whether it be high school, college, and especially in the NFL, just so much more faster they have to do this, are the teams that can anticipate what your next move is going to be and have a plan to be able to execute that as well. Kind of that game within the game, or really the chess match on the sidelines. So I think so much of that work is done during this time of year. And the challenge for that for a high school is, you can't go into the portal and pick up the best available running back in the country, or, the kid you may have graduated, and the schedule you get rewarded for success doesn't help the 15-year-old who's going to be stepping into those shoes. So that's kind of the fun part of this time of year for coaches, to be able to research and get answers. I think the better teams do that really well. And kind of like you mentioned about the Mike Leach, is maybe they do a little bit less in terms of play calling and schematics, but they understand better. Like I'd heard Coach Marquez saying last week about particularly when he liked seeing to a twin side, being able to run option. Like he was always envisioning how to get that particular look. And like Coach could put up 40 points on anybody in his sleep, I think because he's so well-versed and had such great answers. I know when I was a head coach at Clearview High School, I don't think I did a particular good job at this. I kind of copied what I remembered our college coaches doing and what you see of Andy Reid and guys like that on the play sheet. And I would set up in a Google sheet and I would split it in thirds. And it was like left hash, middle, right hash. And I would just prepare my verbiage. So if the ball got put on the right hash and I know I wanted to run power to the field, like I would look on that right side of the column and I have the play, the formation written out and how I would call power. So in a game, I could kind of look down and track and find, what I needed. We had it broken down into sections, and I actually just looked at this earlier today from my most recent year of being at Clearview. And I don't think I did a particular great job, but it had, kind of our first and second down type of plays. I would have an opening script, and in that script, I was looking for how much shifting and formational conflict could I put a defense in? And that would kind of tell us a plan. And I would really try to make sure I would get through as much of that script as possible. And on my sheet, I would literally just, if I liked the player, was a good look, or we got good yards, I would mark it with a check. If it was something I thought looked great, I would circle it, and if it was something that wasn't that great, I just kind of put an X. So I would chart. So whether it was later in the game or halftime, I could go back to that and see like, all right, what were we doing well, or what presented what we were looking for. The next section was kind of your 3rd and 3-ish, right? It's like, okay, your crunch time type of plays. What did I feel we could execute the best? It wasn't necessarily like, how do I put a matchup against this team? It was like, how do I know my guys can get the tough yards in this particular play? We had some 3rd and longs on there, right? Same thing, middle of the field, how we would call it, left hash, how we would call it, right hash, how we would call it. And then I had a couple more sections. So I had kind of like, you think of the Super Bowl, like you want to run some clock here, or you want to throw the dagger. Well, I had it literally said dagger. And it was like, if we could get a big momentum play and throw a knockout punch, like here's the 3 plays that we would look to be setting up. Those might be similar in actions that we would do all year, but they were very much like this front, it looks like we can do that, or this formation, we get this coverage. Here's how we're going to try to exploit it. Then I had probably 3 2-point plays. And the way we would do them is like, I had a certain period, one day a week where it was like, maybe a 10-minute period. And I would just rep them over and over and over. And it was always funny because like, if I had it drawn up in camp or in September, they don't look great, but by the time you got to, right around Halloween, when it starts mattering the most, we could have executed those against anybody. And we had one game in particular, like, we had a giant, really oversetting a formation of one side, shift and trade and reduce a receiver to the other. We created 3 extra gaps, ran a jet sweep, and he could have laid down and rolled into the end zone. It just worked perfectly, but it's because of the time on task and the preparation for those that it kind of paid off. But that's how we had set up when I was at a high school level of how we would start to build and kind of things we would like to do. I think the first portion, like when I would script, it worked well. Like it showed what I thought would be a flaw, or maybe it wasn't. It would just kind of clear the picture for me. But a lot of times we would settle back into a lot of the, hey, we do what we do type of calls anyway. But that's how we would go about trying to at least build a starting point of, all right, what are we going to call in this situation?
I wanted to get to something you just mentioned, which is where you just said, we do what we do. You talked a couple minutes ago about you spend a lot of time in the off season preparing. And a lot of that time is spent on the group you have coming back. What are we going to do? What's our focus going to be? What's the core of our offense? What do we believe in? Where are we hanging our hat, et cetera? But then you get in season and you start breaking down film of your opponents, and suddenly it's not like your thought process changes, but you begin to see things. You begin to see weaknesses. You begin to see things that you feel like they could exploit. You begin to self-evaluate. Can we expand on this or that? So when you get to now really beginning to prepare that call sheet, you have to find the right balance between the things that you want to do. Here's what we do versus here's how we can exploit their defense. Take us through that process. How do you determine how much of each goes on your call sheet?
Yeah, that's great. So I think what I felt was a shortcoming or what I noticed specifically my last year as a high school head coach is we were kind of developing and coming up with a plan of how to respond to their defense, right? Well, when I went to Alvernia as a coach, in our game planning, what we did differently, it was similar in how we set it up structurally, and something we even did in high school. Like I'm a visual guy, so I would draw the front and literally look at the gaps. Like, okay, I think we can run this formation and we can execute this play here, and then against this coverage, and I would write it out. So then I'd look at it and say, okay, in trips, here's all the plays we like, and that's kind of how I would start to build it. Well, what I noticed is, my last year we lost in the semifinals. So like we had a successful year, you could say. But against the teams that were really, really good, we would like hang around in the first half, and some of the stuff we were scheming up, it might hit or it might score, it might give us a lead. And then it was kind of like we were out of bullets in the chamber, and they were, teams that were better than us or evenly matched to better, they would pull away. And the biggest step that I was missing was kind of what you had mentioned, Coach, about what are your known commodities in an offense and what do you expect the next year? And then your system already having those answers built in. Well, as a high school coach, I was kind of skipping that whole portion and just getting into, okay, now what's the counter punch is going to be? And if you're doing that, I don't want to say you're offense of the week, but you're limiting what you've spent the most time on task all summer, all off season, stuff like that. So what I learned in college was we would take like a particular formation and we would break things down into 4 columns. And if you're kind of new to doing this or you're a first time OC, I'm what I think I do best as a coach is I'm completely comfortable in the amount I don't know. So I'm very willing to accept and learn and I have no problem with what I don't know. So I saw, and I know you guys have used some of this stuff before, but Dub Maddox, right? He's kind of talked about the 4R system and passing game and passing attack. And he talked about setting up kind of columns. And it was like, okay, he had a rule. It was like your rhythm, your read, your rush, and your release. And he would game plan that way. And he's like, okay, your rhythm is if you're a basketball player, you're flying up the court, you're in rhythm, you step into a 3 and you hit it. That's like everything's going well. Your pass drop is successful. You get a clean read of a coverage and you hit a play in rhythm, right? Your rush is similar to like your check down stuff and so on. But what he was setting up was like, okay, the first column was here's all your plays in your offense and the tags and stuff that you already have that should work against the looks they present. So we would say, all right, we're starting with trips. Here's everything we think is a favorable matchup for us and the plays that we can run in. And we had, it was like 7 situations on the field. The next column was like, okay, we see this as their defensive system. These are their better players. Here's what we anticipate them doing against these plays if we have success. And that was kind of more your weekly tweaks or any kind of adjustment. So it's still within the wheelhouse of it, but you might be changing a responsibility. You might add a tag of that week. And so it wasn't like abandoning what you did well, but it was adding another layer of wrinkles. So let's say, it's a long game. It's a long fight. You're feeling each other out with what you both do normally. And then here comes your counterpunch to handle what they would do. The next kind of column of that stuff was, all right, those are going well. You're kind of trading blows back and forth of a game. Now they're going to turn the heat up, right? How can we make sure that we are completely sound and protect, but take a shot that can flip a game when it presents itself? And that list is obviously, so each of these columns kind of dwindled down further and further. And then the last one was like, if the right situation in the game presented itself within this regular formation you do, what's kind of the dagger or home run play that, these are like your reverse passes, that kind of stuff that maybe you're calling situationally twice in a season, but you're preparing for it in case that arises. So once I saw that end, like, I was kicking myself as a high school coach of kind of skipping that first step of here's what you normally do and you're anticipating tags. So you're still kind of doing what you do. Right. Yeah. So that was kind of really, really helpful for me in that process to see like, all right, here's guys at the next level and kind of the depth that they're able to break things down, but then how it puts you and your team in a great position to kind of find success with things that aren't completely unfamiliar. Because if you are kind of offense of the week, Well, that means you only had, 1.5 practices through the week to be really good at it too.
Right.
So I think that was really helpful for me, kind of understanding of how can you put the offense in the best position to be successful.
So 2 things in response to what you just said. One, it has overwhelmingly been my experience in all the years I've been coaching that when you start putting in new stuff for an upcoming opponent, it fails. Right? When you start saying, oh, well, hey, they're going to play a tight front. So and we still want to run our zone game. So, all right, let's do this. We're going to block out with the guard and we're going to fold the tackle up onto the backer and we're going to single block the nose and blah, blah, blah. You start messing around with your scheme, your core stuff. You just, like you said, you won't have enough reps at it to get good by game time. So if you can instead find an answer within your own system, and you mentioned the term tags, right? By tweaking a core concept that you have rather than reinventing something, that is a much better plan. And the second thing I'll say is, and this is going to lead me to my next question, it's tempting as you get deeper into a season, especially, to begin carrying a bigger and bigger and bigger call sheet, to start building the Denny's menu. How do you limit yourself from doing that? How do you decide inevitably what gets included and what makes and what gets cut?
I think that's a great point and a danger, big danger. To be honest with you, I think there's so many great coaches around. I don't know any who don't fall victim to this a little bit, I do think so. When looking at that, after writing up a per formation thing, you kind of get a feel of okay, maybe our power read game isn't really going to be a huge component of this because of whatever reason. Or, hey, there's 2 All-American D tackles. Maybe inside zone isn't going to be our bread and butter this week, or so on and so forth, especially down to the high school level. Again, to mention Mike Leach, I had seen he had mentioned one time, he's that's great. That's a great plan, great tweak, great scheme. What are you taking out? And he said he would meet with his staff and if there was less value in what they were scheming up compared to, what they repped all spring ball, all summer camp, they wouldn't do it, and it kind of goes to the old adage, be good at what you do. And you're better off at window dressing it as opposed to kind of starting a new play. And it's funny, teams kind of settle back into what they're really good at anyway. But I think that's definitely a gigantic challenge for coaches of, how do you be extreme precision in your execution, and it's by continuing to build on what you do well. But I have not mastered that technique myself. That's for sure.
Well, it's funny. Two quick things. My first year as a head coach, I can't remember who we were playing, but I built this massive call sheet. There was 90 plays on it. And I mean, they weren't all new plays, but there was about 90 different calls on the sheet. And we played great. We ran the ball really, really well. And when I went back after when the game was over, I saw that we had 44 run plays. We ran inside zone 32 times. And it was what the hell do I have all these calls for? That's the dream. That's the dream, right? Yeah. When you can just limit yourself just to a couple. It doesn't always happen like that.
I think we get every coach is paranoid of what if it's not enough, and then
that's 100% it.
Kind of throw your hands up on the shoulder. And, I do have this philosophy and I've tried to push towards it where it's a school of 3. It's all right, I want to only teach 3 run schemes. Mm-hmm. I want to only have 3 concept passes. I want to have, maybe 3 RPOs, and 2-3 screens, 2 pocket movements. And if you could do that and just be really good at it, I think you could be dangerous as a team. But I mentioned I coach with Rob Davis, a great offensive mind for a really long time. And we meet every day, every single day. Our schedule kind of matches up and we're able to prep and plan. And we'll say that, and then we'll come in and it's yo, do you see this college team run this play? Or yo, did you talk to this high school coach? And then all of a sudden it's 4 or 5. What if he did 6? I'm
Well, this is the time of year too
It
when
is.
everybody's putting stuff up on Twitter and Instagram, and
Yeah,
you look at all this cool stuff, and
it is
you
cool.
start building your menu, and by the time you get to June, you got 200 ideas.
Yeah.
But trimming that, I remember watching a TED Talk one time. I was watching this woman talk. She was talking about storyboarding for fiction writers, and I said, this strikes me as kind of similar to building call sheets for football games. And she wrote all this stuff on a whiteboard, like notes, and a million different points. And then she just got out the eraser and erased it all. And you could see frantically like people in the audience who were scribbling and hadn't written everything down yet. And they were like, what do I do? And then in Sharpie and just big bold letters right across the board, she wrote subtract. And she said the biggest mistake that young writers make is they fall in love with every idea that they have. And ultimately they have a whole bunch of nothing.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a trap that play callers can fall into. You stuff looks great on the whiteboard. It looks great on the whiteboard. But then you get out there and you practice it, and you can trick yourself sometimes into thinking, this is going to be great. And oftentimes it's not.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. As a coach, you've obviously run into a lot of fans, parents, maybe even administrators who have lots of suggestions for you, especially if you're the play caller. Everybody in America thinks they can be the OC.
Yeah, they do.
They don't call it Monday morning quarterback for nothing, right? So a lot of people, I think it looks easy. But if you've ever done it, you recognize how unbelievably hard it is to be a real-time play caller. What do you think are some of the big things that a lot of people who aren't in the process don't understand about it? What are they missing?
So I think I try to think of people who I think there's a talent or a natural feel, whereas like some people, like I think of people who. So I was coaching at Clearview, which was near Paulsboro, and I had an assistant coach who played at Paulsboro, and he had coached there, and he was awesome, and a couple of them over the years, and they all mentioned that like Paulsboro's former coach Glenn Howard, like he would see stuff on the field in real time and have his adjustment before the ball carrier was tackled and able to see it. And like, that's a skill, that's a talent. And it's like, sometimes I don't know if everyone could catch up to it. I think there's a real skill. And like you're saying about what people don't understand. So I was talking with, we were actually talking with Brick Memorial's coach a couple weeks ago about like, they run a really, really cool offense. And he was like, we know if we see this particular front, well, then these plays, like, yes, of course we practice them and rep them during the week, but that's not going to be a good luck. We're not doing it. And he kind of stuck by it, and they've been really successful. So the number one thing I think is like that coach was doing is trusting your system. And like people from the stands don't necessarily know, or most people watching football don't understand like what a system is looking to execute to do. What's built into that? How do you verbalize the things that you're trying to say? Like that's one of the biggest challenges, especially in high school. Like, can your players mentally handle like what you're teaching them to look at and to execute? And like, I think as some of the teams I had probably one of the best players I ever coached. His name is Mike Ancona. We called him the Terminator. He was never tired. He was never hurt. He never failed a set in the weight room. Like he was a monster. And he went and played like strong safety in college while he was playing quarterback. And like, he had a very strong arm. His deep ball was the best. But if we were like an air raid and throwing, 70 times a game, like that wasn't putting him in the best position to be as successful as, he ends up scoring 25 touchdowns. Yeah. So I think knowing that and kind of the strengths or limitations of what your team can or cannot handle, I think that's a really big thing. Like, my brother was a really good high school and college football player. He's a scholarship college football player. I have a cousin who's a really good high school and played college football as well. And they used to always come to the games when I was coaching. And I remember like, they're always supporting, but I would walk by and at halftime, like, yo, there's this, there's that, there's this. I'm like, guys, you're right. I can't do any of that. Like, you can't call it, like, yeah. And not in a demeaning way. It's just like, you have such a limited amount of time with your players. And I think of like you guys at Ocean City, like how many of your kids are 2 indoor 3 sport athletes? Like, so you have them for even less time than you might, because they're moving on to the next sport. And, a lot of places have challenges like that, but like, so you have to be not only concise in what your verbiage and language is going to be, how you're going to prepare them, and then how they're going to get reps to be able to execute it. Like, it's just a lot. And you almost have to pick your battles of what are we going to be really good at,
Yeah.
And you don't want to like, you don't want to throw a kid, he can't complete that, like, but
even
also
though you may know that, right?
Yeah. I'll tell you what, Coach, like at your guys' games in the past or other places, like if I am a spectator, I am more inclined to throw a comment back in the stands to kind of show people like, hey, you guys really don't know what you're talking about,
Yeah.
But the cool thing, like, that is from a good place too. Like,
Yeah.
I'd rather have a crowd full of bleachers of people criticizing what I do when we win than not as many people there, like,
I agree, man. It comes with the territory, no
definitely.
doubt. So, all right, last question. What do you, if you're having a successful day, right? You're on the field, your offense is humming, man, and you seem to look down at the call sheet, and everything's just on. You're like, I like that, I like that, I like that. Because you and I have both been there where you look down and you get the opposite. The whole menu looks awful.
Yeah.
You're just like, I can't call that, I can't call that, killing us on that. But when it's going well, what do you think that's a product of? How do you, if we started this conversation by saying, here it is, it's Monday, you're beginning to build it. Well, now it's Friday night or it's Saturday afternoon, and you're in the third quarter, and you're up a couple scores, and your offense is churning. Why? What has happened between A and Z?
Yeah, I think even that answer can kind of fall into some different columns too. But I think about the times where like it feels like you can't make a wrong call. And a lot of it has to do with like you predict it right. Kind of what we talked about in those different categories of plays. It's like the first thing is usually mano a mano. Maybe your team is a little bit better than the other team. And then it's like, that doesn't matter. Like it kind of takes care of itself where not like everything you call works, but over the course of the game, your team will be able to execute better and those games kind of pull away.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when you're able to correctly predict, okay, they're going to give us this coverage to this look and consistently take advantage of what that presents. When you're going to they're going to show you this front to this formation and we like this play. Well, when that play's hitting and all of a sudden, you get up a score or 10 points or 2 scores or the flow of the game, there could be a defensive score or a special teams play that kind of swings momentum. Like those plays build. And in the first quarter or the first drive, when it's like, that weak side power that you thought they had an open gap on is going for 4 yards. Well, in the third quarter, it's going for 14. And like a defense feels like it's trying to chase and play catch up when really on the scoreboard, they might not be that far behind, but just kind of the way the game is going. But I think the biggest thing for that is, besides whether or not a team is, if they're evenly matched, is you're predicting right. And then when you make those calls, your kids make the plays. They do what they do. We can draw up as much as we want, but when you got a guy, you got players who can execute, they really make you look good. And that's kind of the fun part of seeing, what you thought and what your guys prepared and understood. And then all of a sudden they take advantage of it. It's like, it just makes it all worthwhile. And it kind of like, see guys, this was the plan and this is what we've been building for. So that's always really fun. For me, I think always one of the best games I ever called. I think of a couple of them, but a couple coincidences are like my biggest wins is the plays that you dial up, they hit big. And like I know I mentioned before, like I'm a huge dagger guy. Like if we get last time I won a playoff game as a coach, like it was 14-0, boom, we smoke a running back, they fumble, we're on the ball. The kids are calling out the play as they're running on the field because I told them all week, don't even look at me. This is what we're running. We run an end reverse pass, 40-yard touchdown, 21-0, 6 minutes into the game. Like it was over, and you can kind of ride that momentum and set it up. But anytime it was a game going successful, it was what we schemed up besides just the game plan, but the called shots, they hit and they hit big. And then all of a sudden it takes a game that if you played 10 times, maybe doesn't go your way more, or maybe you only win 4 of them. But on that day, when those plays hit, man, it's a lot of fun.
It is, man. It's very satisfying because
Yeah,
you recognize the amount of time you've put in
Yeah.
there. I think people don't understand how much film work there is, and then you have to trust what you see on film, and then translate that into what you believe you can do with your offense, and then drill it all week long to make sure the kids can execute it, and then actually do it in real time on that Friday night. And that's a lot of work, and it's a lot of stress because what if you're wrong?
Yeah.
Or what if it's not that they're better? What if it's that you haven't prepared them and given them the best opportunity to succeed? Because that's a sick feeling as a coach. When you're lying there at 4:00 in the morning and you can't fall asleep, you're reliving the game in your head and you're saying like, damn it, why did I do that? Or why didn't I do this? That second guessing it's almost like a feeling of like you let them down.
Yeah, big time. I think on the flip side of that, when it does work, it's really cool. And I think of kids today, and like, people can be critical of young people. I don't feel as critical as some others, but like we ask our kids like to show up to all these things, to lift really hard, to, we're hands-on with these guys, 50 weeks a year? And we really, really push them, not a lot of, tons of coaches, more coaches than not. And then you get to camp, and it's 2.5 weeks till you get to a game. And then the game week, like there's a lot of hours that go in before they play another team, and like now, what are we guaranteed? 9 of them?
Yeah.
Like before the playoff cutoff. So like to see it pay off, and then to see like, your kids' faces, your coaches' faces, the community's face, like it's so much fun. I think that's awesome. And like, I think of one of my best games I ever called as well was during the COVID year. So Coach, I know you guys were probably like, in my opinion, I thought you guys were the best Group 4 team in South Jersey that year. That was a championship team. My team was not, right? So we were kind of a team where we had to outwork everybody to compete. Well, you couldn't get in a weight room after March. It was just so much uncertainty. And then the program I was with, we had been shut down for 2 weeks, like 5 different times throughout the season. And like, it's hard for kids to kind of keep their mind into it when you're so used to the football regiment and the flow of the week. So we had less than 10 full pads practices on the year. We had 3 games in 11 days, right? So we played the first game. It was their 4th game. We had 5 practices, right? So we didn't win that game. The next week, the team we were supposed to play, they got shut down. So like we're trying to find games and it's falling all apart. So finally, like Wednesday afternoon, my AD, Mike Vicente, he was wonderful. He comes out to practice and he's like, Steve, I think I got a game for you. There's this team, Roxbury in North Jersey. They just got brand new turf stadium, brand new lights, brand new bleachers. They're going to buy you guys food if you come up. Like they just want to play. They know your situation. They're young. They think it's an evenly matched game. And I'm like, that was at a time where we thought, by next Monday, everybody could be shut down. So we're like, all right, we'll play. So Coach, I went up and it was freezing and I had like my play sheet with me, but we had such a small menu of what we could do. I literally had my hands in my pocket, in my jacket, and just called plays. Mm-hmm. And we were in such a rhythm, and it was like, we knew what we were good at. We were kind of rolling, and like we were scoring explosive touchdowns all over. And I really was thinking about kind of that, the Mike Leach, there's 6 plays, 4 verts was called 6, like that was kind of all they did. I'm like, there's a science to doing things that way too. And I don't know if that's possible every game, but I'd hope to find kind of a happy medium towards that someday.
Yeah, I agree. His belief was that if you drilled it well enough and if you had the right adjustments on it, then it couldn't be stopped unless you were willing to drop 7 all the time. And in that case, you got to run the football.
Right.
So, hey man, this was great. I really enjoyed the conversation, and this is one of the things I think that makes coaches fall in love with the profession. Is this is a physical challenge for the kids, obviously, but it's an unbelievable mental challenge for coaches, and it keeps you feeling vibrant and passionate about this this great game that is football. So, Steve, man, I appreciate you coming on. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Coach. I look forward to catching up soon and hoping to be a part of doing some more work with you guys.
Absolutely, man. You guys are going to hear more from Coach Scanlon moving forward. All right, but tomorrow we got our Thursday episode. I got a great guest tomorrow, Roderick David, who was an NFL scout in the Atlanta Falcons organization for 6 years. He's also scouted college football for a long time. He's going to come on the program and he's going to talk about what is advanced scouting in football? What do advanced scouts do, and how does that process work? How do they help prepare NFL teams for football games? That's going to be a great show tomorrow. So for Steve Scanlon, I'm Kevin Smith. This has been the Call Sheet Daily. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Coach.